Hello, and thanks for joining us here on the Art Mentorship Society of Alberta's YouTube channel. My name is Tanninen, and I'll be guiding you through this series of painting basics. Today we're going to be going through the fundamentals of painting the human face.
Okay, so we have our regular setup. We've got our canvas, our brushes, clean water, a cloth, our palette. This time I'm going to use titanium white and a phthalo Prussian blue. And similar to when we were painting the bodies, a good technique to think about painting faces is to start with the bones. So, of course, that would mean the skull. So the easiest way is to take the top part of the skull, I believe, which is just a semicircle, slightly elongated sides. And then from about there, right, is maybe the middle of the face. So the cheekbone's going to be somewhere around here. Maybe a bit wider than that. Where the cheekbones are, the eyes would be above that. I think the skull would go up a bit more, but we can fix that in a minute. In between all that, the nasal cavities. And we'll put in some pearly whites. And the spaces between the jaw would be shadow. This is just a skull. We're not going to worry too much about this particular part, but it'll help in illustrating the basics in painting the human face and just sort of how faces work. So clearly all faces are different shapes, there's different proportions. I'm just going off my imagination here. So essentially, there's the face. Gonna give that a second to dry, and then we'll break it down. Okay, so we've hit that with the hairdryer, let it dry for a bit. I extended the skull up a little bit higher just because generally, anatomically speaking, that's how it goes, and I've added some more bones of the neck in there. And the reason why I put the skull, top of the skull up a little bit higher is because generally, this is a classical drawing technique. Something that can help when painting faces is just how to divide up the space of the face. So you have the shape of the head, there's the top and the bottom. Depending on the face, the proportions may vary. Generally, the eyes are somewhere in the middle. So that's why you can see the sockets right there. Lots of different shapes of eyes. I'm just gonna make those ones. Above the eyes, generally there's eyebrows, not always, but usually. And the eyes are at about the middle of the face, and then the nose would be, so if the eyes are in the middle, then you're gonna quarter it down from there. So the chin might be here. The nose would be, I guess the nasal cavities there might act sort of as where the bridge of the nose would be. So let's put the end of the nose there. And then there'd be, I forget what the scientific name of it is, this little divot above your lip, but we always called it Cupid's bow, which I thought was cute. So we're just gonna put that there. And then from the eyes down, you have the nose, and then about halfway down between the nose and the chin, you'll have the mouth. And you can see where it aligns with the teeth. I hope that when we're doing this, you can kind of see how we're building off of a skeleton, which is a really good way to think about the body, because the more advanced you get, this type of thinking will help you establish ways of working off of different poses, because the skeleton is a much simpler shape than the full flesh of the body. And a bit more in the nose. And the mouth will go here. Symmetry in the face may vary. Shapes and proportions may vary, of course. I'm doing this by memory because I've done this I don't even know how many times, but one day if we get to do these in person, we can work off of a photo or a model altogether, and we can focus more on looking at what you're painting more than the picture that you're painting itself, because painting and drawing is all about looking, and that's just the way it goes. So there's the center of the mouth. Let's make the lip up here, the top of the lip. I feel like that should get a bit more shadow there. Maybe a bit here. And then there's about where the bottom of the lip is. I'm not gonna fully outline the lip just yet, because I haven't made some decisions about how I would like this to look yet. But as I go, I will fill in some parts lighter and darker. But generally you get the idea. So again, to review, there's the whole length of the head. The eyes are somewhere around the middle. The nose is about halfway to a quarter down from there, and the mouth is the next length from there. So we have the general basics of a face lined up here. I think next what I'll do is I'm just going to add in some more eye detail. I'm just going to make this person looking right at us. So now that we have the front-facing facial features down, we can think about the ears. And the ears generally start around the temples by the eyes and end somewhere around the mouth. So I'll block it out on this side too. Ears are tricky. There's a lot of complicated shapes in there. All ears are, you know, they kind of, we all have ears, they all look similar, but they're all surprisingly very, very different. But in general, you know, something like that. For some reason, I think this person at this stage looks pretty funny. It looks like a puppet or something. But let's add in the details. This is a very oversimplification of what a human face can be compared to some more advanced techniques, which you will develop after practicing more and more and more. But essentially from this view, you have the inner ear cavity, do something like this, and then the little bits in there. So from the bone structure, it entirely depends on the person, as we have established, what the general rest of the shape would be. Some people can be quite lean, some people can have a bit fuller features. In this case, I'm just going to loosely go off of the bone structure. So there would be a lot of muscles, essential fatty tissue in there. This one's important here between that dip in the jawbone and the outside of the face. That's what helps you chew. And then mirror it on the other side. And I made a little bit of an error there, I guess you could say, because if we're making it truly symmetrical, which isn't always the case, I needed to just sort of adjust that going out. So there's the jawline. From there, let's give them a neck. Let's say they have this kind of neck, and the trapezius muscle would come down from the spinal column onto the clavicle collarbone area, and let's just leave it at that. And the line we did before kind of is approximately what a hairline might look like anyways, so let's try and just make that the hairline. So I would say that's generally a human face. Let's give it a minute to dry again, and then we'll go in and we'll work on some shading for this, keeping in mind the bone structure, because that'll really help as we develop this image. Now that that's dry, I'm going to take some raw sienna. It's, you know, just like a neutral tan kind of color, a lightish brown, just to go in and basically show where some of the shadows might fall. Depending on the skin tone, depending on the person, the lighting, the angle, it's usually a good idea to do the underpainting, which is what basically this is called, that we'll build up off of, in cooler tones. Sometimes red is good, but things that you wouldn't necessarily think to start from. Let's say we're painting a person with brown skin. So you'd think that you would do it all in shades of brown, when in reality, if you look closer, depending on the lighting and the surrounding reflections from colors that may be near the figure, you could see shades of purple, blue, lots of reds, even a little bit of green here and there. Little bits of those colors touched in here and there will really help make the skin tones of whatever skin tone you're painting look much more realistic. Because if you take a look at your hand, for example, anywhere on your body, it's not a one all over color, right? So look in there and it's amazing how many shades you'll see. So we're gonna go in. What I like to start with is the eyes. They are, you know, let's say generally lit from the top, let's say. So the top of the lids would be in shadow. So we'll do that. And then let's say the light is coming maybe down from this direction. So that would mean that this side of the nose would be shaded. That would mean this side of the little Cupid's bow would see shadow. All this under here, shaded. Under the eyes on both sides, probably pretty shaded. Depending on the cheekbones, there will be a bit of a highlight somewhere between the nose and the mouth on either side. Same with the temple area. Probably a bit from up here too. Let's do it on this side. And the little indent, depending on the face of course, between the eyebrows, which is a bit more indented than the rest of it. So we're going to keep on going. Add more shadows. The more you practice and the more you look at what it is that you are painting, the subject matter, you will see for yourself as you use your eyes what areas need shadow and which ones need highlight. So get a bit more of that ochre there. So you can see underneath where that little indent is. You can, if you touch your face right there, you can feel it, but the space between your upper and lower jaw, right in here. Let's say this person has really defined cheekbones. That shadow is like right in there. Do you see what I mean? So for the purposes of this painting, we'll just roll with that. And then there's the various lines on the face, depending on the face. But generally, from using your mouth, you will get a little line there. You can do this. A we'll extend. So again, the light's coming from down this way. So the darkest parts would be on this side. The darkest part of the nose is the left here. And we will continue with that. And that would mean that this side of the neck would also be the darkest. So as you go, you will learn different ways to handle your brush, how much water with the paint you'll feel comfortable with, what kinds of textures you want to make depending on the water content of your brush, etc. You can go back to our past videos and see some different techniques and ways of approaching that. So there are some shadows. I like his blue hair, but I'm gonna go in and just neutral out that as well. All right, let's give that a second to dry. We'll go in and we'll add some finishing touches before we do a quick silhouette. It's dried a bit using the same yellow ochre. Generally, maybe let's add, this is neon pink, but you can really add whatever. But I want to give a wash to the whole thing, just not to erase what we did already, but to add more of a neutral base to add further shadow and highlight. That's very pink, but that's okay. You can dilute that a bit. And with the thinned out paint, you can see how once we've let the bottom underpainting dry, that painting over top of it is not a big deal because what you've done underneath shows through. Because the paint is wet, I'm going over it a few times because I don't, in this case, want little pools to form like these parts here. That's because it's wet. So if you just continue to be patient and go over it, it'll be good. Okay, let's let that dry. So now that that's dried, I've gone and it's good to use a wide variety of paint or whatever you have on hand. All acrylics generally tend to work together fairly well. This is craft store paint, cinnamon brown. It's a good medium brown. It's a generally pretty good all-purpose color for shading flesh tones, depending on the flesh tone, but it works pretty well. And I mean, you can mix it with other paints depending on the tones that you're observing. For this case, it was handy. I like it. So I'm just going to go in and add further shadow. So to review what we did the skull. We showed where the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose would be, the chin, the hairline, the eyebrows, the rest of the face, some shadows. The highlights are kind of coming out on their own because it's just sort of building itself, which is kind of fun. But so in the darkest parts, we will reinforce some of the shadows. That's a bit too dark. So beauty of acrylic paint is you can kind of play around with it. These little divots on the side of the nose. That one there anyways. Let's say if you make a brush stroke and it feels too harsh, that's fine, because you can always paint over it, smudge it out, let it dry, paint a lighter color over top of it, and just work with it. As I keep saying, if I'm doing this from memory, just my general knowledge of this type of work, but if you're looking at what you're doing, what you're painting rather, the subject matter, it'll inform what the picture is going to look like more. You know, even if you're not necessarily making a direct representation or a direct portrait, but just using it as a model for inspiration of any kind. The real life forms of things really do give you a lot of information about what things look like and how they work visually, and how you can interpret that in your work. You can also keep in mind things like eyelashes, if your subject is wearing makeup or has any other features you'd like to highlight, or features that you'd just like to add in for your own expression. You can do whatever you want. The purpose of these lessons is to teach you the basics so that you can expand from there and further develop your ability to paint faithfully what you see, and also to expand beyond that and abstract things and be creative as much as you like. So for now, I think those are some pretty good additional shadows. We'll go into some highlights now. So I'm just going to use white in this case. When you're painting flesh tones, the more you get into the finer details, the more color that you'll use. You will generally need some white for highlights, especially if there's some strong lighting. But in this case, I would like to give this person some more white in their eyes and give that a bit more definition. I'm going to use the end of my brush to make some fine light points. Generally, eyes are very glossy. You've got to keep them wet, as everyone knows. So because they're wet, they reflect light very easily. So that works for now. And then think about where the light falls. So top of the cheekbones, maybe the bridge of the nose, the sides, I forget what these are called, but above the nostril area. The lip. Right in the middle of the forehead. Blend it out, take some practice. Put a little more highlight there. Let's do some around here. Let's say there's more in here. And then for the purposes of this exercise, you can continue to build from here. I think these are some pretty good basics. What I'm going to do for this specific piece is I'm going to let it dry for a second, and then I'm going to go in and add some finishing touches with black. A lot of people say maybe you shouldn't use black, it's too dark. Maybe they're right, but I subscribe to the idea that you can do whatever you want, and however you want to express yourself is fine. For the purposes of this exercise, I think black will help us define some more of the finer details of what comes next, similarly to how the white sort of showed us what to do for the highlights. So I got one of my smallest brushes, which tend not to last very long. This one's not that old, maybe a few months, but I generally take pretty good care of them, but you can see how easily they fray for small brushes. But that's why it's important to not leave them in water, which I have done a few times, which is why the paint is peeling. Keep them wet, dry them when you're done. So a little bit of black. I'm going to add some black to the eye. And the lid. Keeping my paint wet so that the paint slides easily and makes a solid line and doesn't get too dry or choppy in the execution. Let's add some of the black for the nostril shadows. Alright. And something that I like to do sometimes when I'm painting mouths and lips is to give it a bit more dimension. You'd be tempted to put a solid line all the way across. It's not really how it tends to work, so if you want a little shortcut or something to think about and develop a bit, is just add some dark into the corners, and it gives it more dimension and sort of brightens up the face a little bit, I think. I'm going to add some more dark to the brows here, and then to the sides of the head. Probably some on the ear. Let's bring that hair down a bit on that side. Okay. On this lower part of the jaw, again thinking about the direction of the light. Oops. That's fine. It's fine if you mess up, especially when it's wet and the rest of it's dry, because you can really just wipe it up. Or let it dry and paint over it, it's fine. Or leave it the way it is if that's the way you like it. Alright, so generally that's the way I would recommend building a face. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can pause and rewind and rewatch it however you want. One last thing that I want to show you is a quick profile. So after all of that, we've learned about the general dimensions of the head from top to the bottom. The eyes are somewhere in the middle. The nose and the mouth are between that. The ears are between the eyes and the mouth. It all completely depends on the face you're painting. But for a profile, let's just do a quick one. Forehead, indent by the eyes, nose, lips, chin, and neck. Okay, so that is how I would start describing how to paint faces.
So those are some fundamentals on painting the human face. I hope you found that helpful. As usual, you can practice these techniques and expand from there based off of the subject matter and the particular faces you're looking at. And you can find me on Instagram at Tanninen and the Art Mentorship Society of Alberta on Instagram at AMSA_gram. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.